The night the bride disappeared, the kingdom of Vaya did not hear a scream. It heard bells. 12 enormous bronze bells rang from the eastern tower just after midnight, their voices rolling over the black roofs of the capital and down toward the river where the mist lay thick as wool, and every person who heard them knew what they meant. The royal wedding had failed. Princess Alara, daughter of the neighboring kingdom of Lythorn, had vanished before she could be delivered to the Beast King. By sunrise, the treaty that had kept two nations from war for 17 years would be worthless, and by sunset, the soldiers stationed along the northern border would likely begin marching. In the servants' quarters beneath the royal palace, 20-year-old Mara Vale was still awake, sitting beside a dying kitchen fire with flour on her sleeves and a wooden spoon in her hand when the bells began. She froze after the third strike. At the 7th, she rose. At the 12th, the spoon slipped from her fingers and struck the stone floor. Nobody had to tell her what had happened. For weeks, everyone in the palace had whispered about the coming marriage, about the terrifying ruler who lived beyond the Iron Mountains, about the woman who would be taken to his fortress as a sacrifice disguised as a bride. Mara had heard hundreds of versions of the story. The Beast King was said to have claws instead of hands. He was said to sleep inside a mountain. Some claimed he drank blood from silver goblets, while others insisted he could turn into a wolf large enough to tear down castle gates. Children in the capital played games in which one child pretended to be the Beast King and chased the others through alleys while they screamed with theatrical delight. Mara had never believed the stories completely. She had, however, believed the fear behind them. The palace corridors became a maze of running feet. Doors slammed. Guards shouted. Somewhere above, a woman began sobbing. Mara stepped into the passage and nearly collided with a young maid carrying a bundle of white silk. "They're looking for Princess Alara," the maid gasped. "She's gone." "Gone where?" Mara asked. "Nobody knows." The maid hurried past. Mara stood still for one heartbeat, then another, until an armored captain came around the corner with 4 guards behind him. "You," he snapped. "Your name?" "Mara Vale." His eyes traveled over her plain brown dress, her tied-back black hair, her flour-stained hands. Then his expression changed. Not softened. Hardened into decision. "Come with me." "Why?" "Because the king has ordered every unmarried woman in the palace brought to the council chamber." Mara's stomach tightened. "I'm a kitchen servant." "I heard you." He caught her wrist. "Move." She was taken upstairs through corridors she had never been permitted to enter alone. The palace looked different from the servants' passages. Its marble floors gleamed beneath chandeliers, portraits of dead kings stared down from gilded frames, and enormous windows showed the capital trembling beneath the moon. Mara saw nobles gathered in clusters, pale-faced and furious. At the far end of the council chamber stood King Aldrin, a man whose silver beard and crimson robes made him look carved from old wood. Beside him was Queen Celeste, whose expression had the calm cruelty of someone who had already decided who would suffer for another person's mistake. On the table between them lay a single object, Alara's wedding veil. It was stained with blood. Mara stopped walking. "No," she whispered. The captain released her. King Aldrin looked directly at her. "What is your full name?" "Mara Vale." "Age?" 20. The queen leaned closer. "And your mother?" "Dead." "Your father?" Mara hesitated. "I don't know." That answer drew a murmur from the nobles. King Aldrin's eyes narrowed. "You have no family claim, no political value, no inheritance, and no one powerful enough to object if you leave the kingdom." Mara finally understood. "No." The king did not blink. "You haven't heard the proposal." "I know it." "Then you know why it must be made." Mara backed away. "Find another woman." "We have." Queen Celeste lifted a small black book. 37 noble women were examined. 11 are already married. 9 are pregnant or ill. 6 have fled the palace. 4 refused publicly. 3 were deemed unsuitable by the northern priests. 2 are too young. 1 is the king's niece. Mara stared at her. "And that leaves me." "It leaves you," the queen agreed. "Because you resemble Princess Alara." "I don't." "From a distance, beneath a veil, you do." Mara looked toward the door. 2 guards had moved in front of it. What happens if I refuse? King Aldrin answered quietly. The Beast King receives the news that our princess has disappeared and that we have broken the marriage treaty. He will have legal grounds to declare war. Then let him declare war. Several nobles gasped. The king's expression hardened. You speak as though soldiers are numbers on parchment. They are not. They are fathers, sons, brothers. Villages will burn. Thousands will die. Mara swallowed. And if I go? Nobody answered immediately. The silence told her enough. The Beast King had not married in 16 years. Every bride sent to him had returned, according to rumor, either dead or missing. The last one had been a noblewoman named Seraphine, whose wedding procession had crossed the mountains and never been seen again. Mara looked at the bloody veil on the table. What happened to Princess Ilara? Queen Celeste's fingers tightened around the book. She ran. Why? Because she was afraid. Of him. The Queen's eyes met hers. Perhaps. Mara stared at the blood again. That's not an answer. It is the only answer you are getting. The king rose. Mara Vale, you will travel north before dawn. You will wear the princess's dress. You will cross the border under her name. You will marry King Kael of Varin and remain in his fortress until the treaty is secure. Mara laughed once, a small disbelieving sound. And if he discovers I'm not Ilara? The captain beside her looked away. The queen closed the black book. Then pray he discovers it after the ceremony. Mara wanted to scream. Instead, she looked through the tall windows toward the mountains. Far beyond the capital, black peaks cut into the moonlit sky. That was where the Beast King lived. That was where they were sending her. She had spent her life being invisible, and suddenly the entire fate of 2 kingdoms had been placed on her shoulders because nobody would miss her if she disappeared. She should have been terrified. She was terrified. But beneath the fear was another feeling, colder and sharper. Anger. Not the wild anger of a child denied a sweet, but the precise anger of someone who had just realized that powerful people had never considered her human enough to ask permission. She straightened her back. Fine. The queen looked surprised. Fine. Mara nodded. I'll go. King Aldrin exhaled. You understand what you're agreeing to? No, Mara said. But neither do you. Nobody moved. Then Mara picked up the bloody wedding veil from the table. The room erupted in protests, but she held it against her face and looked at the king through its red-stained lace. If I'm supposed to be a princess, she said, teach me how to act like one. Before dawn, Mara was dressed in Ilara's wedding gown. It was beautiful enough to make her angry. Layers of ivory silk flowed from her shoulders, embroidered with silver vines and tiny pearls. Her hair was braided with diamonds. A veil covered her face. Around her neck, they placed a necklace bearing the royal crest of Lythorn. Nobody mentioned that the necklace had belonged to Ilara's mother. Nobody mentioned that Mara's hands were shaking. At the stable yard, a carriage waited beneath a black canopy. 6 soldiers stood around it, and beside them was an old woman wearing the grey robes of the northern priesthood. Her name was Sister Amora. She was the only person who looked at Mara without either pity or calculation. You don't have to do this, the old woman whispered. Mara almost laughed. Apparently I do. Amora leaned close. Listen to me. The stories about King Kael are lies. Mara stared at her. Which ones? Most of them. Is he a monster? The old woman hesitated. That depends on what you mean by monster. Before Mara could ask another question, a horn sounded. The carriage door opened. Mara climbed inside. The capital disappeared behind curtains of rain as the convoy began moving north. For 2 days they traveled through forests, then across high plains where the wind tore at the carriage like an animal trying to get inside. On the 3rd evening, they reached the Iron Pass. The mountains rose on either side, enormous and jagged, their peaks hidden behind storm clouds. Mara had expected an army. Instead, she saw one rider waiting beneath a black pine. He wore no crown. No armor. Only a long dark coat, boots covered in mud, and a sword at his hip. His horse was enormous, almost as black as the mountain behind him. The rider watched the convoy approach without moving. When the carriage stopped, Captain Wren dismounted and bowed. "Your Majesty." The rider looked at him, then at the carriage. "Where is Princess Ilara?" Mara's blood ran cold. Wren swallowed. "She is inside." The rider's eyes remained fixed on the carriage door. "Open it." Wren looked toward Mara. "Your Majesty, perhaps we should wait until open it." The door swung wide. Mara stepped down. The wind caught her veil and lifted it just enough for her to see him clearly. Kale was not a monster. He was a man, perhaps 30 years old, with dark hair streaked by silver at the temples and a scar running from his left eyebrow to the edge of his jaw. His eyes were a strange amber color. He looked exhausted rather than savage. But when his gaze settled on Mara, something changed in his face. Not recognition. Suspicion. He dismounted. His boots struck the wet ground. He approached until only a few steps separated them. "Princess Ilara," he said. Mara lowered her eyes. "Your Majesty." "Look at me." She obeyed. Kale studied her face for several seconds. "You are not Ilara." Every soldier went still. Mara's heart stopped. Kale's expression did not change. "Take off the veil." Mara lifted her hands. Before she could touch it, Kale stepped closer and gently removed it himself. His fingers brushed her hair. He stared at her. "Who are you?" The question was quiet. That frightened her more than a shout would have. Mara could have lied. She had been ordered to lie. But the words came out differently. "My name is Mara Vale." Captain Wren reached for his sword. Kale raised one hand, stopping him. "Why are you wearing my bride's dress?" Mara looked directly into the Beast King's amber eyes. "Because your bride ran away." Kale's jaw tightened. "And they sent you instead?" "Yes." "Did they threaten you?" "Yes." "Did they tell you I would kill you?" Mara almost smiled. "They told me many things." Kale looked toward the soldiers. "Leave us." Captain Wren protested. "Your Majesty, I said leave." One by one, the soldiers retreated. Even Sister Amora withdrew toward the horses. Soon only Mara, Kale, and the storm remained. Kale looked at the necklace around Mara's throat. His expression became unreadable. "You understand that if I return you, your king may execute you for failing the deception." Mara's mouth went dry. "I understand. And if I keep you, I suppose I become your problem." For the first time, something almost like amusement crossed his face. It vanished quickly. "You have a strange way of speaking to kings. I've never spoken to one before." "You just did." "Then perhaps I'm learning." Kale turned toward the mountains. "Come." Mara stared. "Where?" "My castle." "Am I your prisoner?" He glanced back. "Not yet." That answer followed her all the way through the Iron Pass. Varin Castle appeared after midnight, built directly into the mountain itself, its towers rising from black stone and its windows glowing gold against the storm. Mara had expected a fortress of torture chambers and skulls. Instead, the entrance hall contained bookshelves, old paintings, flowering winter roses, and a massive fireplace where servants were preparing tea. The Beast King's home was not a lair. It was a palace. A strange one, yes, with iron doors and corridors that seemed to vanish into the mountain, but undeniably a palace. Kale handed his wet coat to a servant. "Prepare the east wing." The servant bowed. "For the princess." Kale looked at Mara. "For Mara." The servant blinked. "Your Majesty, you heard me." Mara looked at him sharply. Kale walked away. She followed. "Why aren't you punishing me?" He stopped halfway up the stairs. "For what?" "For lying. You told me the truth. After I was caught." "Still counts." "And the treaty?" Kale's face darkened. "The treaty can wait until morning." Mara hesitated. "What happened to the blood on Ilara's veil?" Kale turned slowly. "You noticed." It was difficult not to. That blood was not hers. Mara's heartbeat quickened. Whose was it? Kale looked toward the dark corridor beyond the staircase. "That is the question I have been trying to answer for 3 years." Then he walked away, leaving Mara alone beneath the flickering chandeliers with a realization that frightened her more than the idea of marrying a monster. Princess Ilara had not simply run away. Someone had wanted everyone to believe she had been taken. And if Kale was telling the truth, the bloody veil had been part of a much larger deception. At dawn, Mara woke to the sound of bells ringing from deep inside the mountain. She opened her eyes in a room she did not recognize and found a small envelope on her bedside table. There was no seal. Inside was a single sentence written in hurried ink: "Do not trust the Beast King, because he is not the one who ordered your death." Mara read it twice. Then the door exploded inward. A masked man rushed into the room with a knife. Mara screamed and threw herself backward as he lunged. The attacker missed, struck the bedpost, and turned. Before he could strike again, a shadow crossed the doorway. Kale seized the man's wrist with one hand and slammed him against the wall hard enough to crack the plaster. The mask fell away. It was Captain Wren. Mara stared in disbelief. Wren's eyes were wild. "You don't understand," he gasped. Kale twisted his arm behind his back. "Then explain." Wren laughed bitterly. She was never supposed to survive the journey. Kale's expression changed. "Who ordered it?" Wren looked at Mara. "The Queen." Mara felt the room tilt. Kale released him only long enough to draw his sword. "Why?" Wren's face went pale. "Because Princess Ilara was never the target." His eyes moved toward Mara. "You were." The castle bells stopped. Silence filled the chamber. Kale lowered his sword. "Explain." Wren swallowed. "The real princess disappeared because she discovered what the royal family has been hiding beneath Lythorn. The treaty was never about peace. It was about access." Mara frowned. "Access to what?" Wren looked toward the mountain walls. "The old blood beneath Varin." Kale's face went completely still. Mara noticed it immediately. Whatever Wren had said, the Beast King already knew part of it. "What is the old blood?" she asked. Kale did not answer. Wren did. "The power that made your king fear this kingdom. The reason Kale's family was hunted. The reason every bride sent here has disappeared." Mara turned toward Kale. "You knew." Kale's eyes met hers. "I knew there was a conspiracy. Did you know my life was part of it?" "No." "Then why did you recognize me?" He looked at her for a long moment before saying, "Because I have seen your face before." Mara's breath caught. "Where?" Kale reached into his coat and removed a small, weathered portrait. He handed it to her. The painting showed a young woman standing beside a river, holding a baby wrapped in white cloth. The woman had Mara's eyes. Mara stared at the portrait until her fingers began to tremble. "Who is she?" she whispered. Kale's voice was almost inaudible. "Your mother." Mara looked up sharply. "My mother died when I was 6. That is what Lythorn told you. You knew her. She came to Varin 17 years ago." Mara stared at him. "Why?" Kale looked toward the window, where snow had begun falling across the mountain courtyard. "Because she was trying to save you." The world Mara had understood that morning, the palace, the wedding, her unknown father, her mother's death, even the stories about the Beast King, began to unravel at once. She had come to Varin believing she was a disposable substitute bride. Now she was discovering that her entire life might have been built around a secret someone had killed to protect. And somewhere beyond those mountains, Princess Ilara was alive or dead, the queen was preparing her next move, and a power buried beneath the kingdom was waiting for the person who carried the bloodline of the woman in the portrait. Mara folded the painting carefully and held it against her chest. "Kale." He looked at her. "If my mother came here to save me, why did she leave me in Lythorn?" Kale's answer came slowly. "She didn't leave you." A cold wind slipped through the broken window. Kale looked toward the mountains as though he could see through stone. "They took you from her." And for the first time since the bells had begun, Mara understood that the wedding was not the beginning of her story. It was the trap that had finally brought her back to the place where the truth had been waiting for her. Mara did not speak for several seconds. She stood beside the shattered window with the portrait pressed against her ribs while snow drifted through the opening and melted against the marble floor. "Taken from her by whom?" she finally asked. Kale did not answer immediately. He walked to the broken window, closed the heavy wooden shutters, and fastened the iron latch. Not here. Why? Because walls in this castle have ears. Mara looked at Ren, who was still being held against the wall. Does he know? Kale's gaze moved toward the captain. He knows enough to be dangerous and not enough to understand what he has become part of. Ren laughed bitterly. You always did speak like a king. Kale's expression hardened. And you always did betray people who trusted you. I didn't betray you. Ren looked at Mara. I was ordered to kill her. And yet you came here. Because the order changed. Mara's eyes narrowed. Changed by whom? Ren's mouth tightened. The Queen. Kale frowned. You said she ordered the assassination. She did. Then why would she change the order? She didn't. Ren looked at Mara with genuine fear. Someone above her did. A low vibration passed through the stone beneath their feet. The candles flickered. Mara felt the floor tremble once, then stop. Kale immediately turned toward the corridor. How long? He asked Ren. Maybe an hour. Until what? Until the eastern gate opens. Kale swore under his breath. He crossed the room, took a black cloak from a chair, and threw it over Mara's shoulders. We're leaving. Mara caught the edge of the cloak. Where? The lower vaults. You said the walls had ears. They do. He opened a concealed door behind a tapestry, revealing a narrow stone staircase descending into darkness. Mara stared into it. That is not reassuring. It isn't meant to be. Kale grabbed a lantern. Stay close. Ren followed behind them, still holding his injured wrist. As Mara descended, she noticed strange markings carved into the walls. They looked like ancient symbols, circles intersected by jagged lines, repeated every few steps. What are these? She asked. Kale kept moving. Warnings. Against what? People. That's very specific. The old architects had a sense of humor. The staircase twisted downward until the castle vanished above them. The air became colder. Then, unexpectedly, warm. Mara could hear water rushing somewhere beneath the stone. At the bottom, they entered a cavern larger than the royal cathedral in Lythorn. A subterranean river flowed through its center, illuminated from beneath by pale blue crystals. Bridges of black iron crossed the water. On the far side stood a circular door covered in the same symbols Mara had seen upstairs. She stepped forward without thinking. One of the symbols began to glow. Kale seized her wrist. Don't touch it. I wasn't going to. You were. How do you know? Because you have the same expression my mother had when she was about to do something reckless. Mara stared at him. You knew my mother well. Not well enough. His voice softened. I was 17 when she came here. She saved my life. Mara looked at him. How? Kale stared across the river. My father had been dead for 3 days. The nobles were preparing to crown my uncle because they believed I was cursed. Your mother came through the western gate carrying a child. Mara's heart hammered. Me? You were an infant. Why would she bring me? Because your father was dying. Mara's breath caught. You knew my father too? Kale nodded. He was not a man from Lythorn. Then who was he? Kale turned toward her. A guardian of this mountain. The word seemed absurd until Mara remembered the glowing symbol. What does that mean? Ren answered from behind them. It means your father belonged to the bloodline that existed here before either kingdom had a name. Kale shot him an angry look. You shouldn't have told her. She deserves the truth. You don't get to decide that. Mara stepped between them. Enough. Both of you. They fell silent. Mara looked down at her hands. So my mother knew about this place. Yes. And she brought me here. Yes. Then why did I grow up in a servant's house? Kale's eyes lowered. Because she asked me to hide you. Mara stared at him. You. I couldn't. I was hunted after my father's death. I sent her to Lythorn instead. And she died. Kale's jaw tightened. I believed she did. Mara took a slow breath. You believed she died. I searched for her for years. Did you ever search for me? Kale looked directly at her. Every year. The answer hit harder than she expected. Then why didn't you find me? Because the woman who raised you changed your name. Mara froze. My name was changed. Kale nodded. Your birth name was not Mara Vale. What was it? Before he could answer, the cavern doors behind them thundered. Ren spun around. They're here. A deep metallic sound rolled through the underground chamber. The circular door across the river began to rotate. Kale's face changed. That's impossible. Mara stepped closer. What? That door hasn't opened in 300 years. The stone beneath their feet shook violently. A crack appeared across the cavern ceiling. Dust rained down. From somewhere beyond the door came a sound that did not resemble a human voice. It was low, rhythmic, almost like breathing through enormous lungs. Ren backed away. We have to go. Kale drew his sword. No. Kale, if that door opens, the entire mountain could collapse. Mara looked at the symbols. One was glowing brighter than the others. She recognized its shape. It matched the mark embroidered inside the wedding gown she had worn. She touched the fabric at her shoulder. The dress. Kale looked at her. What? Mara pulled aside the cloak. Beneath it, silver embroidery formed the same ancient symbol. They put this on me deliberately. Kale's expression became grim. The wedding wasn't meant to bring a bride here. Then what was it meant to bring? He looked at her. You. A roar shook the cavern. The circular door opened 3 inches. A wave of freezing air swept across the river. Kale moved in front of Mara. Stay behind me. I don't think hiding behind you is going to solve this. For once, obey me. No. He glanced back, incredulous. No. If they sent me here because of this bloodline, then running away won't stop them. Mara stepped toward the glowing symbol. Kale blocked her. You don't know what it will do. Neither do you. Exactly. Then we learn. She reached toward the stone. Kale caught her hand. The moment their skin touched, the crystals beneath the river exploded with light. Mara gasped. A vision flooded her mind. She saw a woman running through snow while carrying a baby. She saw the same cavern centuries earlier, filled with hundreds of people wearing silver masks. She saw a man standing before the circular door, his hands covered in blood. She saw a crown placed upon his head. Then she saw herself as a child, standing in a burning house while a woman screamed her name. Not Mara. Another name. A name that echoed through the cavern like a bell. Aurelia. Mara tore her hand away. She stumbled backward. Kale caught her before she fell. What did you see? She stared at him, breathing hard. My name. What name? She looked into his amber eyes. Aurelia. Kale went pale. Ren whispered, the last heir. The door opened another foot. From the darkness beyond came a woman's voice. Finally. Mara's blood turned cold. The voice was familiar. Not from memory. From the palace. The Queen. Mara Vale, Queen Celeste called through the darkness, or should I say Aurelia? Kale raised his sword. How did you get here? Celeste stepped into the blue glow wearing a dark traveling cloak. Behind her stood 12 armed soldiers and 3 figures in silver masks. She smiled calmly. You should know better than to ask how I enter a place that belongs to my family. Mara stared at her. My family? The Queen's smile widened. You truly know nothing. She removed her hood. That is why they chose you. Kale moved forward. You will not touch her. Oh, Kale. Celeste sighed. You still believe this is about you. One of the masked figures stepped beside her and removed his mask. Mara recognized him immediately. King Aldrin. Her supposed king. Her supposed protector. Her supposed employer. He looked older than he had the night before, as though the mountain itself had stripped away the disguise of authority and revealed something much uglier beneath it. Mara, he said. Come home. Mara laughed in disbelief. Home? You have been lied to. By you. By everyone. You sold me to him. Aldrin shook his head. No. I brought you to him because he is the only person capable of keeping you alive. Cale's sword lowered a fraction. What? Celeste glared at Aldrin. You weren't supposed to tell her that. She deserves to know. Mara looked between them. Why would the Beast King keep me alive? Aldrin answered, because your blood can awaken the thing beneath this mountain, and if anyone else controls it, every kingdom in the north will fall. Mara felt sick. And you knew this? 4 years. Then why send Ilara first? Aldrin's expression cracked. Because she was meant to distract the enemy. Mara stared at him. What enemy? A masked figure stepped forward. Us. He removed his mask. Mara knew that face too. It belonged to the royal physician who had treated her when she was sick as a child. She remembered his gentle hands. She remembered the medicine he gave her. She remembered her mother telling her never to drink anything he prepared. Mara's stomach dropped. You. The physician smiled. Your mother was difficult to kill. Cale moved so fast Mara barely saw him. His sword struck the physician's blade with a deafening clang. Soldiers rushed forward. The cavern erupted into chaos. Ren charged the nearest masked warrior. Cale fought 3 men at once, moving with terrifying precision. Mara ducked behind a stone pillar as arrows shattered against the wall. Queen Celeste shouted commands while Aldrin tried to reach the circular door. Mara saw him raise a small silver dagger. The glowing symbol beneath her feet pulsed. She suddenly understood. The dagger was not meant for her. It was meant for the door. Stop him, she shouted. Cale turned. Aldrin drove the dagger into the ancient stone. The cavern screamed. A wave of energy burst outward, throwing everyone from their feet. Mara struck the ground hard enough to lose her breath. When she looked up, the circular door had opened completely. Beyond it was not a chamber. It was a vast black void filled with thousands of tiny lights, like stars trapped beneath the earth. Then one of those lights moved toward her. Cale crawled across the floor. Mara. The light struck her chest. She screamed. Every crystal in the cavern went dark. When the darkness lifted, Mara was standing alone beside the river. Everyone else had frozen. Cale, Ren, the soldiers, even the queen were motionless. A voice spoke inside Mara's mind. Not the queen's. Not Cale's. An older voice, female and calm. You have returned. Mara looked toward the open doorway. A woman emerged from the darkness. She was dressed in white, her hair silver, her face impossibly familiar. Mara could not breathe. Mother. The woman smiled sadly. Not yet. She reached out her hand. But soon. The cavern shook again. The frozen soldiers began to move. Cale pushed himself upright. Mara, get away from her. The woman turned toward him. Her eyes became black. Cale stopped. She whispered one word. Beast. Cale staggered as though struck. Mara saw his hands change. His fingers lengthened. Dark veins spread across his skin. His amber eyes flashed gold. The stories were not entirely lies. The Beast King was real. But he was not the monster Mara had feared. He was a man fighting whatever had been buried inside his bloodline. Cale dropped to one knee, gripping his chest. Mara, he managed. Don't let it choose for you. Mara looked at the woman. Then at Cale. Then at the ancient door. She finally understood the terrible bargain at the center of everything. The mountain did not need a queen. It did not need a king. It needed a vessel. And for centuries, both kingdoms had been killing, betraying, and marrying their own people to find one. Mara stepped forward. I won't be your vessel. The woman's smile disappeared. Then what will you be? Mara looked at Cale. The person who decides. She reached for his hand. The moment their fingers touched, the entire mountain began to roar. The mountain did not roar like an earthquake. It roared like a living creature awakening from centuries of sleep, a vast vibration that traveled through the soles of Mara's feet and climbed into her bones until she could feel every heartbeat in the cavern. The river surged backward. The blue crystals along its banks cracked one after another, releasing flashes of pale light that illuminated the frozen faces of soldiers and nobles alike. Cale's hand tightened around Mara's. His skin was burning. The dark veins that had appeared beneath his skin now reached his neck, and his breathing came in short, painful bursts. "Let go," he whispered. Mara refused. "No. Mara. You told me not to let it choose for me. Then listen carefully. It will try to choose through me." His amber eyes flickered, then turned black for a fraction of a second. Mara felt a pressure inside her mind, like an enormous door being pushed open from the other side. The silver-haired woman watched them with patient interest. "You cannot stop what began before your ancestors were born." Mara looked at her. "Who are you?" "The memory of the first guardian." "You're not my mother." "No." The woman's expression softened. "But your mother carried my blood." Mara stared at her. "Then where is she?" The apparition did not answer. Instead, she looked toward the far side of the chamber. "Behind the door." Mara followed her gaze. The darkness beyond the ancient threshold had begun to change. Shapes moved inside it. Hundreds of them. Thousands. Human silhouettes standing motionless in an endless black landscape. Some wore crowns. Others carried swords. Some were women in wedding gowns. Mara recognized the clothing immediately. Brides. Every woman who had vanished after marrying into Varin's royal family was standing there. Their faces were pale and their eyes closed. "They're alive," Mara whispered. Cale's breathing stopped. "Impossible." "Not alive," said the apparition. "Remembered." Mara stepped toward the door. Cale tried to stop her. "Don't." She turned. "If they're trapped in there, I'm going in. You don't know what is waiting." "Neither did my mother." His face changed at the mention of her. "Mara, please." It was the first time he had ever said please to her. She looked at his hand around hers. The claws were beginning to emerge from his fingertips. She should have been afraid. Instead, she saw the exhaustion in his face. The Beast King was not becoming a monster because he wanted power. He was becoming one because he had spent his entire life holding something inside himself that nobody had taught him how to control. "You're coming with me," she said. "I can't." "Why?" "Because the thing beyond that door recognizes my blood. Then it will recognize yours too." Cale shook his head. "That's exactly why I have to stay." Before Mara could answer, Queen Celeste moved. She drew a hidden pistol from beneath her cloak and fired. The shot struck the ground between Mara and Cale. Everyone in the cavern came back to life at once. Soldiers shouted. Ren tackled one of the masked men. Aldrin stumbled toward the door, screaming that the ritual had begun. The silver-haired apparition vanished. Mara ducked as another shot shattered a crystal beside her. Cale lunged toward Celeste. The Queen fired again. The bullet struck his shoulder. He staggered but did not fall. "Cale." Mara ran to him. Blood spread across his coat. "I'm fine." "You're bleeding." "I've had worse." "That is not reassuring." He smiled despite the pain. "You are becoming difficult." "I've been difficult since the wedding." He almost laughed. Then his expression became serious. "Listen. There is a chamber beneath the door. Your mother may be there." "How do you know?" "Because I heard her voice when I was 17. Mara's eyes widened. "You heard her. She told me to protect you. And you failed." Cale looked at her without defending himself. "Yes." That honesty hurt more than an excuse would have. Mara took his face in her hands. "Then don't fail again." She kissed his forehead before turning toward the door. Cale stared after her as if she had struck him. Ren shouted from across the cavern, "Mara, the Queen is getting away." Mara looked up. Celeste had reached a narrow bridge leading toward the eastern passage. Aldrin was following her, but the physician had stayed behind. He was fighting Ren with a curved blade. Mara suddenly realized the Queen had not been trying to kill her. She had been trying to delay her. "Cale," Mara said. "What? Where does that passage go?" "The royal crypt." "Then that's where she's headed." Cale looked toward the bridge. "She's going to release the dead." Mara's stomach dropped. "Why?" "Because the dead are guardians too." They ran. The bridge shook beneath their feet as the mountain continued to tremble. Below them, the underground river had become a violent black current. Ren followed, having knocked the physician unconscious. Aldrin disappeared through the passage ahead. Celeste waited at the far end. She held a silver key in one hand. "You don't understand what you're doing," she called. Mara kept walking. "I understand enough." Your mother understood nothing. Mara stopped. "Don't speak about her." Celeste smiled. "She begged me to let you live." Cale's expression changed. "You were there." "Of course I was." "You killed her." "No." Celeste tilted her head. "She killed herself." Mara felt the words like a blade. "Why?" "Because she knew what you would become." Mara shook her head. "You're lying." "Am I?" Celeste held up the silver key. "Ask yourself why your mother hid your true name. Ask why the Beast King's family has guarded this mountain for centuries. Ask why every bride sent here vanished." She looked at Cale. "He isn't protecting the kingdom from the monster, Mara. He is protecting the monster from the kingdom." Cale raised his sword. "Enough." Celeste turned the key. Somewhere beneath them, a lock opened. A deep metallic click echoed through the mountain. The floor split. Mara fell. Cale grabbed her wrist at the last second. She dangled above a shaft filled with darkness. Celeste disappeared through a hidden door. Ren rushed to help, but Cale shouted, "Don't." His claws dug into the stone. Mara looked up at him. "You're shaking. Because you're heavy." She glared. "That is the worst thing you could say right now. I was trying to make you angry." "Why?" "Because angry people hold on." Mara almost laughed despite herself. She grabbed his wrist. "Pull." Cale did. With Ren's help, they dragged her back onto the bridge. "Where did she go?" Mara asked. Ren pointed toward a narrow staircase. "Down." Cale looked at the darkness. "The crypt." They descended. The stairs were ancient, wet, and covered in frost. At the bottom they found a circular chamber lined with stone coffins. Hundreds of them. Each bore the crest of a former king or queen of Varin. At the center stood a single empty coffin. Mara approached it. Her name was carved into the lid. Not Mara Vale. Aurelia. Beneath the name were 2 dates. One from 20 years ago. One from the present day. Mara touched the stone. "This was prepared for me." Cale looked horrified. "I didn't know." Ren walked to the opposite wall. "Look." There was a mural depicting a woman with Mara's face standing beside a beast with Cale's eyes. Above them was an inscription. Mara read it aloud. "When the blood heir joins the Beast King willingly, the mountain shall open, and the old crown shall return." Cale stared at the painting. "That cannot be right." Mara looked at him. "Why?" "Because the old crown was destroyed." "What crown?" Ren asked. Cale pointed to a dark shape painted above the 2 figures. "The crown of ash." Mara remembered the vision. "The crown placed on the bloody man's head. What does it do?" Cale answered quietly. "It gives its wearer command over every guardian bound to the mountain." "Then Celeste wants it." "Yes." "And Aldrin?" "Probably wants the same thing." Ren frowned. "Then why are they working together?" Cale looked at him. "They're not." A crash echoed from above. Mara turned. Footsteps approached. Dozens of them. Cale drew his sword. "They're coming." The first soldiers entered the crypt. But they were not wearing the Queen's colors. They wore white armor marked with the crest of Lythorn. Mara stared. "Those are my king's soldiers." Aldrin appeared behind them. "Mara." He looked exhausted. "Come with me." Cale stepped between them. "No." Aldrin raised his hand. "I don't want to fight you. You already sent assassins." Because Celeste was controlling the operation. Mara looked at him. "You expect me to believe you?" "No." Aldrin lowered his weapon. "I expect you to understand that she intends to awaken the old crown and use you as the key. And you don't." "I intend to destroy it." Mara studied him. "Then why did you send me here?" Aldrin looked at the coffin. Because there was no other way to bring you into the mountain without triggering the guardians. You used me. Yes. He did not deny it. And I am ashamed of that. Cale's eyes narrowed. Why should we trust you? Aldrin looked at him. You shouldn't. Then he turned toward Mara. But you should know this. Your mother is alive. Mara stopped breathing. Where? Inside the mountain. How? She entered voluntarily 20 years ago. Why didn't she come back? Aldrin's face became grim. Because she was guarding the crown of ash. Mara looked at Cale. He seemed equally stunned. Then why did you tell me she was dead? Aldrin closed his eyes briefly. Because if you knew she was alive, you would have searched for her. And if you searched, the mountain would have found you before you were ready. Mara stepped closer. You had no right. I know. You had no right to decide my entire life. I know. You made me a servant. I know. Her voice cracked. You let me believe nobody wanted me. Aldrin's face tightened. That was the only way to keep the people hunting you from realizing who you were. Mara stared at him. Then she noticed movement behind the king. A figure in a silver mask raised a crossbow. She shouted. Aldrin turned too late. The bolt flew. Mara pushed him aside. The bolt struck her shoulder. She fell backward. Cale caught her. Mara. Pain exploded through her arm. She looked at the bolt. Its tip was black. Poison. Cale's face became terrifyingly calm. He broke the shaft and threw the poisoned metal aside. Who fired? Ren pointed toward the doorway. The physician stood there, bleeding from his mouth, smiling. The Queen sends her regards. Cale handed Mara to Ren. Keep her alive. Where are you going? To end this. Mara grabbed his coat. Don't. His eyes met hers. The amber had begun to fade. If I don't stop him, he will reach the crown. Then we go together. You're poisoned. Then we don't have time to argue. Cale stared at her for a moment. Then he nodded. Fine. They ran. Behind them, Aldrin ordered his soldiers to hold the crypt. Ahead, the passage opened into a chamber filled with white fire. At its center stood Queen Celeste. In her hands was a crown made of blackened silver. Around her were the ghosts of the vanished brides. Their eyes were open now. They were watching Mara. Celeste placed the crown of ash upon her own head. Every ghost bowed. Too late, she whispered. The mountain has chosen its queen. Mara stepped into the chamber. No. Celeste smiled. Then come and take it from me. The ghosts turned toward Mara. One by one, they lifted their hands. The chamber filled with voices. Some begged. Some cursed. One woman stepped forward and spoke clearly. Aurelia. Mara knew her instantly. She had never heard that voice before, yet somehow she recognized it. Her mother. The woman reached through the darkness and touched Mara's cheek. You were never meant to inherit the mountain, she whispered. You were meant to free it. The crown of ash cracked. Celeste screamed. Cale grabbed Mara's hand. The mountain split open beneath them. And from somewhere far below came the sound of an enormous heartbeat : The heartbeat came again, deeper this time, and the chamber answered with a violent pulse of white light that raced through the floor, climbed the walls, and burst through every crack in the ancient stone. Mara felt the poisoned wound in her shoulder burn as though a coal had been pressed beneath her skin, yet the pain suddenly became distant compared with the sight before her. The ghosts of the brides were no longer translucent. They had become almost solid, their dresses moving in a wind that did not touch anyone else. Some were young, barely older than Mara. Others were women with streaks of silver in their hair. One held an infant made of light. Another carried a broken sword. They had not been victims of the mountain. They had been imprisoned by it. Queen Celeste staggered beneath the cracked crown of ash, gripping the sides of her head as voices whispered around her. Get them away from me, she screamed. I command you. None obeyed. Cale stepped forward, sword raised. The crown doesn't recognize you. Celeste glared at him. I am queen. Not here. She ripped the crown from her head and threw it toward Mara. The object flew through the air, trailing black sparks. Kale struck it aside with his sword, but the instant the blade touched the crown, a shockwave threw him across the chamber. He hit a stone pillar and collapsed. Kale. Mara ran toward him, but the poison suddenly surged through her body. Her knees buckled. She caught herself against the floor with one hand. Her vision blurred. The ghostly figure of her mother appeared in front of her. "Don't fight the poison," the woman said. "What?" "It was made from mountain ash. Your blood can transform it." Mara looked at the wound. "How?" "You must choose what the mountain becomes." Mara laughed weakly. "That sounds simple." Her mother smiled sadly. "It never was." Then she vanished. Mara crawled toward Kale. He was conscious, but barely. Blood ran from the corner of his mouth. "You shouldn't have touched the crown," Mara whispered. "You shouldn't have followed me. That was never going to happen." He tried to rise. She pushed him down. "Stay there. Bossy." "You're welcome." Behind them, Celeste had seized the crown again. She pressed it against her forehead. The cracks began closing. "You cannot stop me," she said. "I have spent 20 years preparing for this." Aldrin entered the chamber with Ren and 6 soldiers behind him. His face changed when he saw the crown. "Celeste." She smiled. "You finally understand." Aldrin raised his sword. "Take it off." "Or what?" "I'll kill you." Celeste laughed. "You never could." Aldrin's grip tightened. "I should have killed you 20 years ago. You didn't because you loved her." Mara looked at him. "My mother." Celeste nodded. "He loved your mother. That was his greatest weakness." Aldrin's face hardened. "And you used it." "Of course." Celeste turned to Mara. "Your mother was supposed to open the mountain for me. Instead, she betrayed us. She hid the crown and trapped herself inside with it. Then she sent you away." Mara's voice was quiet. "Why did she trust you at all?" Celeste's expression became almost wistful. "Because once, before kingdoms and crowns, we were sisters." The chamber went silent. Mara looked at Aldrin. "Is that true?" He nodded slowly. "They were half-sisters." Celeste laughed bitterly. "She was always the better one. The beloved one. The chosen one. The woman who could walk into a room and make everyone believe she belonged there." Her eyes settled on Mara. "And then she had you." Mara stood. The poison had become strangely cold. "You killed her because you were jealous." "No." Celeste shook her head. "I killed her because she chose you over me." A tremor shook the chamber. The ghost brides began moving toward Mara. One placed a hand on her shoulder. Another touched her injured arm. The poison in her blood turned black, then silver, then disappeared into the stone beneath her feet. Mara gasped. Her wound closed. The bolt fragment fell harmlessly from her flesh. Kale stared at her. "What did you do?" "I don't know." A deep voice answered from beneath the chamber. She remembered. Everyone froze. The crown of ash began to glow. Not black. Gold. Celeste stumbled backward. "No." The floor cracked beneath her. A staircase appeared where solid stone had been. At its bottom stood an enormous throne carved from white crystal. Upon it sat a skeleton wearing ancient armor. In one hand it held a sword. In the other, a small wooden toy horse. Mara recognized it instantly. She had owned that toy as a child. It had been the only thing she remembered. From before her 6th birthday. She had thought it was something her mother had made. She approached the throne slowly. Kale followed. "Mara, wait." She picked up the wooden horse. A hidden compartment opened in its belly. Inside was a tiny folded piece of paper. Her mother's handwriting covered it. Mara read the first line and began to cry. "If you are reading this, then the mountain has finally accepted you as its keeper." Kale stood beside her. "What does it say?" Mara continued. "The Beast King is not your enemy. He is the lock. You are not the key. You are the hand that decides whether the lock remains closed." Kale stared at the words. "The lock." Mara looked at him. "What does that mean?" His face had gone pale. "My family wasn't chosen to rule Varin. Then why? To contain the creature beneath it. The heartbeat sounded again. This time it came from Kale. Mara looked at his chest. A faint golden light pulsed beneath his skin. You're the lock. Kale nodded slowly. And if the mountain opens completely, you die? Mara asked. He didn't answer. She grabbed his coat. Tell me. Yes. Celeste began laughing. Finally. Now you understand. She raised the crown. Kill him, Aurelia. Take his blood and open the mountain. The power inside will belong to you. Mara looked at Kale. He was watching her with an expression she had never seen before. There was no fear in it. Only acceptance. Don't, he whispered. If you have to choose, choose the kingdom. Mara shook her head. I'm not choosing between you and a kingdom. Mara. I'm choosing neither. She took the crown of ash from Celeste's hands. The queen screamed as the crown burned her palms. Mara held it without pain. The ghosts of the brides gathered around her. Their voices merged into one. Free us. Mara closed her eyes. The crown transformed. Blackened silver became clear crystal. The ancient symbols along its edge disappeared. She lifted it above her head, but instead of placing it on herself, she turned toward the throne and set it upon the skeleton's skull. A wave of golden light exploded through the chamber. The ghost brides began to fade. One by one, they smiled. The last among them was Mara's mother. She stepped close enough for Mara to see the tears on her face. I am sorry, she whispered. You deserved a childhood. Mara reached for her. Stay. Her mother shook her head. I stayed as long as I could. I don't want to lose you again. You won't. She touched Mara's forehead. You carry more than my blood. Her eyes moved toward Kale. You carry the choice I never had. Then she disappeared. Mara stood motionless. Kale came to her side. He did not try to comfort her with words. He simply took her hand. The mountain began collapsing. Stone fell from the ceiling. Audren shouted for everyone to move. Ren grabbed Celeste, who fought like a cornered animal. Leave me, she screamed. The crown is mine. Audren looked at her with something close to grief. It was never yours. He took the crown from the skeleton and threw it into the white fire. Celeste screamed as though part of herself had been destroyed. Then the floor broke beneath her. Ren reached for her, but she refused his hand. I would rather die than be saved by you. She vanished into the darkness. Audren stared after her. She was my sister. Mara looked at him. And she was willing to kill me. I know. That doesn't make it easier. No. Kale suddenly staggered. Mara caught him. The golden light beneath his skin was fading. It's happening, he whispered. What? The lock is opening. Mara looked at the collapsing chamber. Can we stop it? Not anymore. Then what do we do? Kale looked at her. Run. They ran. The passage behind them collapsed in sections, forcing them to leap over cracks and squeeze through narrow openings while stone thundered down around them. Audren and Ren led the way toward the upper tunnels. Soldiers were shouting. Dust filled the air. Mara stayed beside Kale, who was growing weaker with every step. You said the lock was opening, she shouted over the noise. What happens when it opens? The creature comes out. What creature? I don't know. That's not useful. I have never been in this situation before. Neither have I. A section of ceiling crashed between them and the others. Mara and Kale were suddenly trapped in a narrow passage. Kale leaned against the wall. Go. No. Mara. No. If the mountain collapses, you die with me. She stepped closer. Then we find another way. He smiled weakly. You really don't know how to surrender. Not when everyone keeps asking me to. A low growl came from ahead. Both turned. Two golden eyes appeared in the darkness. Kale drew his sword despite his trembling hand. Mara stood beside him. A massive creature emerged from the shadows. It had the body of a wolf, the horns of a stag, and wings folded along its back. Its fur shimmered like moonlight. Kale whispered, the first guardian. The creature lowered its head. Mara felt no fear. It walked past them and touched its nose to Kale's chest. Golden light poured from its body into him. Kale cried out. The dark veins vanished. His claws receded. His eyes returned to their natural amber. The creature turned toward Mara. She reached out. It lowered its head beneath her hand. Then it spoke without moving its mouth. The lock has chosen its keeper. Mara looked at Kale. What does that mean? The creature answered, he is no longer bound. Kale stared at his hands. For the first time in his life, the Beast King's curse was gone. He looked at Mara as if he could not believe it. You freed me. Mara shook her head. No. We freed each other. The mountain gave one final enormous shudder. Then silence. The collapse stopped. Far above them, dawn began filtering through the cracks. When Mara and Kale emerged from the mountain hours later, the battlefield outside Varin Castle was covered in snow. Lythorn soldiers had lowered their weapons. Varin's guards stood beside them. Nobody knew what to do. Then Ren rode forward carrying a white flag. The war is over, he announced. Aldrin followed. He removed his crown and placed it on the ground. The treaty is void, he said. But not because we broke it. He looked toward Mara. Because neither kingdom has the right to own you. Mara stared at him. What happens now? Aldrin gave a tired smile. Now you decide. Kale stood beside her. And if she decides to leave? Aldrin looked at him. Then she leaves. Mara turned toward the mountain. The ancient fortress was damaged but still standing. She thought about the frightened girl who had entered it wearing another woman's wedding dress. She had expected to die. Instead, she had discovered her real name, her mother's truth, a kingdom's secret, and the man who had been called a beast because nobody wanted to admit how badly they had failed him. Kale looked at her. You don't have to stay. Mara smiled. I know. You don't have to marry me. I know. You don't have to be queen. I definitely know that. He laughed quietly. Then what will you do? Mara looked toward the rising sun. First, I want breakfast. Kale blinked. Breakfast? I've been poisoned, attacked, betrayed, thrown into an underground kingdom, chased by ghosts, and nearly crushed by a mountain. She looked at him seriously. I am starving. For several seconds Kale simply stared at her. Then he laughed. It was a real laugh, deep and unguarded, and the sound carried across the snow-covered courtyard. Mara laughed too. Ren shook his head. Aldrin smiled for the first time in years. Even the soldiers seemed relieved to hear something ordinary after a night of death and magic. Yet the story did not end there. 3 weeks later, Mara stood on the balcony of Varin Castle wearing no wedding gown and no crown. Below her, builders repaired the eastern wall. Traders from Lythorn had arrived in the market. Children from both kingdoms played together in the courtyard while former soldiers unloaded crates of grain. The castle no longer felt like a prison. It felt like a beginning. Kale approached carrying 2 cups of tea. He handed one to her. The council wants your answer. Mara sipped the tea. Which council? Both. What do they want? They want to know whether you'll become queen. Mara looked at him. And what do you want? Kale hesitated. She raised an eyebrow. Careful. He smiled. I want you to choose what makes you happy. That's not an answer. It's the only one that matters. Mara looked at the mountains. Then I don't want a crown. Kale nodded. Good. I want the northern border opened. Done. I want the servants paid properly. Already done. I want the royal archives opened to everyone. That may start a war with the historians. Then let them complain. Kale laughed. Anything else? Mara looked at him. Yes. He waited. I want the wedding cancelled. Kale blinked. Completely? Completely. And after that? Mara stepped closer. After that, if you still want me, ask me properly. Kale's smile disappeared, replaced by stunned silence. Mara laughed. What? Nothing. You look terrified. I have faced armies, assassins, ancient guardians, and a mountain demon. He looked at her. None of them frightened me as much as you just did. She smiled. Good. Months later, when spring arrived, Varin held a ceremony unlike any wedding the kingdoms had ever seen. There was no treaty. No substitute bride. No forced alliance. No blood-stained veil. Mara walked into the courtyard wearing a simple blue dress, and Kale waited beneath the old pine tree where they had first met. He did not wear a crown. Neither did she. Before the gathered people, he took her hands. Mara Vale, he said, I cannot promise you a life without danger. I wouldn't believe you if you did. I cannot promise I will always know what to do. Good. I cannot promise the kingdom will always be peaceful. Obviously. He smiled. But I can promise that you will never again be treated as someone's substitute. Mara's eyes filled with tears. Then I choose you. He placed a ring on her finger. Not gold. Not silver. A simple band carved from the wood of the old pine. When they kissed, the bells of Varin began ringing. Not 12 bells announcing a failed wedding. Not funeral bells. Not alarms. Bells of celebration. And far beneath the mountain, where the old kingdom slept, the first guardian opened its golden eyes and listened. It did not awaken. It did not need to. The keeper had chosen. The lock was free. The beast was no longer a beast. And the girl who had once been sent north because everyone believed nobody would care if she disappeared had become the woman who taught 2 kingdoms that a person could not be sacrificed simply because powerful people found sacrifice convenient. Years later, travelers would tell stories about the Beast King's bride. Some would say she had conquered a monster. Others would say she had inherited an ancient kingdom. Children would whisper that she could command the mountain with one word. Scholars would argue over whether the old guardians had truly existed. But the people who knew Mara best told a simpler story. They said she had entered Varin as a substitute bride and stayed because, for the first time in her life, she had been given a choice. And whenever someone asked Kale whether the stories about the Beast King had been true, he would smile, look toward the woman standing beside him, and say, yes. There was a beast. Then he would take Mara's hand. But it was never the one they thought. For a while, Mara believed the hardest part of her life was over, and in some ways she was right. There were no more assassins hiding behind curtains, no ancient queens emerging from underground chambers, no royal councils deciding whether she was valuable enough to live. Yet peace, she discovered, had its own difficulties. War had rules. Peace required people to learn how to live with one another after those rules disappeared. The first year after the mountain opened was filled with arguments. Lythorn demanded compensation for abandoned military posts. Varin demanded the return of prisoners taken during border raids. Farmers fought over grazing rights. Merchants complained about new taxes. Nobles who had spent generations teaching their children to fear the Beast King suddenly had to explain why they were expected to attend dinner with him. Mara spent more time in council rooms than she ever had in kitchens, and she quickly learned that diplomacy could be more exhausting than running from assassins. One afternoon, she entered the great hall to find 3 elderly nobles shouting at one another over a map. Kale sat at the head of the table looking profoundly tired. You promised this meeting would be short, Mara said. Kale glanced at the clock. That was before Lord Varric discovered he has opinions. The old nobleman slammed his fist on the table. I have always had opinions. That's the problem, Kale muttered. Mara sat beside him. What happened? Varric pointed to the map. Lythorn has moved the eastern boundary marker. By 6 feet, said a Lythorn representative. 6 feet is still 6 feet. Mara examined the map. Where is the original marker? Under a tree, said Kale. Which tree? The one that was struck by lightning last winter. Mara looked at the map again. Then this isn't a border dispute. Everyone stared at her. She tapped the parchment. It's a tree dispute. Silence. Then Kale covered his face with one hand. I married a menace. Mara smiled. You asked properly. The council erupted into laughter, and the argument ended before sunset. Such moments became common. Mara discovered that ruling did not require pretending to know everything. It required knowing which questions mattered. Kale discovered that he could ask for help without believing it made him weak. Ren, who had survived the collapse of the mountain and the fall of the old royal conspiracy, became commander of the United Border Guard. Aldrin retired from the throne of Lythorn and spent his remaining years rebuilding villages that had suffered during the years of fear. As for Celeste, no body was ever found beneath the mountain. That fact troubled Mara more than she admitted. The others believed she was dead. Mara did not. The mountain had swallowed many things, but it had also preserved them. And sometimes, late at night, when the wind came down from the northern peaks, Mara thought she heard a woman's voice whispering her name. She never told Kale. Not because she feared him, but because she knew he would immediately send soldiers searching every tunnel beneath Varin, and there were some mysteries that needed patience. 3 years passed. Their marriage became ordinary in ways Mara had once thought impossible. They argued about books. Kale left wet boots near the fireplace. Mara stole blankets during winter. He hated pears. She insisted that pears were perfectly respectable fruit. He disagreed so strongly that the royal kitchens eventually stopped serving them. They traveled through the kingdom together, sometimes officially and sometimes disguised beneath simple cloaks so they could visit villages without ceremonies. In one mountain town, an elderly blacksmith recognized Kale despite his hood. "Beast King," he said. Kale sighed. "I haven't been called that in months." The blacksmith grinned. "You're still a beast when you owe me money." Mara laughed so hard she nearly fell against the forge. Kale eventually paid the debt. In another village, a little girl approached Mara carrying a wooden toy horse. Mara froze. It was almost identical to the one she had found in the underground crypt. "Where did you get that?" she asked. The girl pointed toward an abandoned chapel. "An old woman gave it to me." Mara's pulse quickened. "What old woman?" "She had white hair." The child smiled. "She told me to give it to the lady who remembers." Mara looked at Kale. He immediately understood. They followed the girl to the chapel. Inside, there was nobody. Only a small wooden horse resting on the altar. Mara picked it up. Carved beneath it were 4 words. "The door is not closed." Kale's expression hardened. "We should leave." Mara shook her head. "No. Mara. We've spent 3 years pretending the mountain is finished." "It is finished." "Then why is this here?" Kale had no answer. That night, they returned to Varin Castle. Mara placed the wooden horse on the desk in her study. She did not sleep. At midnight, the candles went out by themselves. The horse moved. It rolled slowly across the desk and stopped beside a map of the northern mountains. A black line appeared across the parchment. Kale entered the room moments later, sword already drawn. "You saw it?" Mara nodded. "Yes." "The mountain?" "Yes." He looked at the map. "There's a valley here." "I know. No one lives there." "Apparently someone does." Kale stared at the line. "Tomorrow." Mara looked at him. "Tonight. You're not going into the mountains at midnight. You married me. I am beginning to regret that decision." She smiled. "Too late." They left before dawn. Only Ren knew where they were going. The 3 of them rode north with provisions and climbing gear, following a trail that appeared on no modern map. By noon the forest had become dense. By evening the trees vanished altogether. The valley beyond was surrounded by cliffs, and at its center stood a ruined village. Mara dismounted. Every building had been abandoned for decades. Snow covered the roofs. Yet smoke rose from one chimney. Ren drew his sword. "Someone is living here." Kale nodded. "Stay behind us." They approached the house. Before Kale could knock, the door opened. An old woman stood there with a walking stick. Her hair was white. Her eyes were Mara's eyes. Mara stopped breathing. The woman looked at her and smiled. "You took your time." Mara whispered, "Mother?" The old woman nodded. "Hello, Aurelia." Kale stepped forward. "You were supposed to be dead." "I was," the woman said. "For a little while." Ren stared. "That is not how death works." The woman laughed. "You'd be surprised." Mara rushed forward and embraced her. Her mother was warm. Real. Human. Mara had imagined this moment for years, but reality was stranger than imagination. There was no perfect speech. No dramatic revelation. Only a daughter holding the woman she had mourned since childhood while both of them cried. After several minutes, Mara stepped back. "Why didn't you come for me?" Her mother looked down. "Because I was afraid." "Of what?" "Of myself." She invited them inside. The house contained no furniture except a table, a bed, and shelves filled with books. On one wall hung dozens of drawings of the mountain. "When I entered the mountain 20 years ago, I believed I could destroy the crown of ash," her mother explained. "I was wrong. The crown could not be destroyed. It could only be changed." Mara listened silently. "The mountain needed a guardian," her mother continued. "I became one." "Then how did you leave?" "I didn't. What you saw beneath the mountain was only a part of me." Mara frowned. "So you're still there?" Her mother nodded. "And here?" Cale understood first. "The mountain split your soul." "Not my soul." She looked at him. "My memory." Cale's face tightened. "That's why you knew me." "Yes." "And the guardian?" "It remembers what I cannot." Mara sat down. "Why did the mountain call me?" Her mother looked at her for a long moment. "Because the old system was built on sacrifice. The guardians believed someone must always be bound to the mountain. You broke that rule. Then why is the door still open?" "Because freedom is not the same as safety." Her mother opened a chest beneath the table. Inside lay several black stones. "When you changed the crown, you freed the trapped brides. But the force beneath the mountain did not disappear." Cale's expression darkened. "Where did it go?" "Into the world." Silence filled the room. Mara stared at the stones. "How much?" "Enough." Ren frowned. "Enough for what?" Her mother looked toward the window. "Enough to wake something that has been waiting beneath the northern sea." Cale stood. "The sea?" She nodded. The mountain was only one prison. Mara felt the old fear return. Not the fear she had known before meeting Cale, when she believed monsters lived in castles. This was different. She had learned that monsters were often people who made choices. But whatever waited beneath the northern sea was not a person. It had no kingdom, no treaty, and no reason to negotiate. "How long?" Mara asked. Her mother looked at the sky. "Perhaps 6 months." Cale reached for Mara's hand. "Then we have 6 months." Her mother shook her head. "No." She pointed toward the black stones. One of them had begun to glow. "You have 6 days." The room fell silent. A distant sound rolled across the valley. It was not thunder. It was a horn. Another answered from somewhere beyond the cliffs. Then another. Ren rushed outside. Mara followed. On the horizon, hundreds of lights were moving through the snow. An army. Not Lythorn. Not Varin. Their banners were unfamiliar, black cloth marked with a white circle split down the center. Cale drew his sword. "Who are they?" Mara's mother stepped into the doorway. Her face had gone pale. "The descendants of the first guardians." Mara stared at the approaching army. "What do they want?" Her mother answered, "The mountain's power." Cale looked at Mara. "And they know you have it." A horn sounded again, much closer. Then a voice carried across the valley. "Aurelia, keeper of the broken crown, we have come to take back what your mother stole." Mara stepped forward. "Who are you?" A man on horseback emerged from the snow. He wore white armor and carried a spear made of black crystal. "My name is Lord Soren," he called. "I am the last heir of the first guardians." Cale moved beside Mara. "Then you should know the guardians no longer serve the crown." Soren smiled. "They don't need to." He raised the black spear. The ground beneath the valley cracked. Mara heard the heartbeat again. This time it did not come from the mountain. It came from beneath the sea. Soren looked toward the distant horizon. "Your kingdom has 6 days before the first wave rises." Mara looked at Cale. He looked back at her. Neither needed to speak. Their peaceful years had ended. The substitute bride who had once been sent north to prevent a war now stood at the center of a conflict far older than either kingdom. But this time she was not alone, and this time nobody could choose her fate for her. Mara stepped onto the snow-covered road and faced the army. "Tell your people something," she called. Soren waited. "If you want what I carry, you will have to come and take it." He smiled. "That is exactly what I intended." Behind him, the army began moving. Kale raised his sword. Ren shouted orders. Mara's mother opened the ancient chest. And beneath the northern sea, something enormous opened its eyes: the first arrow never reached Mara. It disappeared into a wall of golden light that rose from the snow the instant she lifted her hand, scattering sparks across the valley like burning stars. Every soldier on the opposing ridge stopped. Even Soren looked surprised. Mara stared at her palm. A thin golden mark had appeared there, shaped like the broken crown. Her mother stepped forward. "Don't fight them here." Mara glanced back. "Why not?" "Because this valley is built over an old guardian road. If the bloodline beneath the ground wakes, everyone here will die." Kale looked toward the cliffs. "Then where do we take them?" Her mother pointed toward the western ridge. "There is an abandoned fortress called Blackwater Hold. The first guardians built it to defend the sea passage. If you reach it before sunset, you can seal the road." Ren frowned. "And if we don't?" The old woman looked toward the horizon. "Then the enemy won't need an army." Soren raised his spear. "Take them." The valley exploded into motion. Varin soldiers rushed to form a shield around Mara while arrows hammered the snow. Kale seized Mara's arm. "Run." They sprinted toward the western trail as Ren shouted orders behind them. Mara's mother followed with startling speed for someone who looked so fragile. "Left," she called. "Not the main path." They veered between two cliffs just as a blast of black energy struck the road where they had been standing. Snow erupted into the air. Mara stumbled. Kale caught her around the waist and kept moving. "You all right?" "I'm fine." "You nearly fell." "I said I'm fine." "You sound like me." "Then you should know how annoying it is." He laughed breathlessly. Behind them, soldiers clashed in the narrow pass. Ren stayed behind to slow Soren's army. Mara looked back once and saw him standing alone at the entrance, sword drawn, facing 20 riders. "Ren!" Kale shouted. "Keep going. He'll die. He knows what he's doing." Mara wanted to argue, but another explosion shook the mountain. They reached the western ridge near dusk. Blackwater Hold appeared through the snow, a ruined fortress built into a cliff overlooking a frozen sea. Its walls were cracked. Half the towers had collapsed. Yet ancient runes glowed faintly around its gates. Mara's mother stopped. "This is where the first Guardian Kings made their final oath." Kale looked at the fortress. And what was the oath? That no one would ever awaken the thing beneath the sea. Mara frowned. "What is it?" Her mother hesitated. "A name is dangerous when spoken aloud." "Then don't tell me its name. Tell me what it is." "A hunger." The word chilled Mara more than the wind. "A hunger for what?" "Memory." Kale stared at her. "Memory? It feeds on the memories of living creatures. The more people it consumes, the more human it becomes." Mara looked at the distant sea. Beneath the ice, something enormous moved. "How do we stop it?" Her mother pointed toward the fortress. "The original seal is inside." They entered through the broken gates. Dust and snow covered the corridors. Mara noticed murals on the walls depicting the first Guardians. Unlike the images beneath Varin, these paintings showed the Guardians fighting one another. Kings turned against queens. Brothers stabbed brothers. Cities burned. At the center of every scene was a black creature with no face. "Why did they fight each other?" Mara asked. Her mother answered, "Because the creature whispered to them." "What did it say?" "Whatever they most wanted to hear." Kale's expression hardened. "Then that's how it escapes." "Yes. It doesn't break the seal." "No." Her mother looked at Mara. "It convinces someone else to break it." They reached a circular chamber beneath the fortress. In the center stood a stone pedestal. Upon it rested a sword made of transparent crystal. Mara approached. The broken crown mark on her palm began glowing. "That's the guardian blade," her mother said. Kale stared at it. "Only the keeper can draw it." Mara wrapped her fingers around the hilt. The sword came free without resistance. A shockwave swept through the fortress. Outside, the frozen sea cracked. Soren's army had reached the gates. "We have company," Kale said. Mara looked at the sword. Its blade reflected not her face but memories. She saw herself as a child. She saw her mother holding her. She saw Kale at 17, standing beside her. "Father." She saw the palace servants whispering about the Beast King. Then she saw something she had never remembered. A little boy stood beside her in the kitchen when she was 6 years old. He was crying. Mara touched the blade. The image changed. The boy looked up. It was Kale. She pulled her hand away. "That can't be." Kale stared at the blade. "What did you see?" "You." His face went pale. "Where?" "In my childhood." Her mother closed her eyes. "I hoped you would never remember that." Mara turned toward her. "You knew?" "Yes." "Then tell me." Her mother sighed. "When you were 6, I brought you to Varin one final time. Kale was hiding there after an assassination attempt. You met him." Mara stared at Kale. "I don't remember." The mountain erased the memory. "Why?" "Because you had seen the creature." Kale looked at his hands. "What did we see?" Her mother answered, "The first awakening." Mara's skin prickled. "So we knew each other before the wedding?" "Yes." Kale stepped closer. "Do you remember anything else?" Mara closed her eyes. At first there was only darkness. Then came the sound of a child's voice. Her own. "Don't be afraid. I'll protect you." Another voice answered. A boy's voice. "Then I'll protect you too." Mara opened her eyes. Kale was crying. She had never seen him cry before. "You promised," she whispered. He nodded. "I remember now." The fortress shook. A crack opened across the ceiling. Soren's voice echoed through the corridors. "Aurelia, your memories are not yours to keep." Mara lifted the crystal sword. "They are now." The doors burst open. Soren entered with dozens of warriors behind him. Ren was among them, bruised and bleeding but alive, dragged forward by 2 soldiers. Mara's heart jumped. "Ren." He grinned. "You thought I'd let 20 riders beat me?" Soren stepped forward. "Enough." He raised his black spear. "Give me the blade." Mara looked at him. "No. You don't understand what you're carrying." "I've heard that before. The blade can cut the boundary between memory and reality." "Then why do you want it?" Soren smiled. "Because my people have spent centuries imprisoned in memories. We deserve our bodies back." Mara frowned. "What does that mean?" Soren looked toward her mother. "Tell her." The old woman said nothing. Soren's voice became bitter. "Your mother lied to you. The first guardians weren't monsters. They were people who sacrificed their bodies to contain the creature beneath the sea. Their consciousness became the army you saw beneath Varin. The brides weren't the only prisoners. Thousands of guardians are still trapped between worlds." Mara looked at her mother. "Is that true?" Her mother nodded. "Yes. And the creature? It feeds on them." Soren lowered his spear. "Help me destroy the prison, and my people will be free." Kale stepped forward. "And what happens to everyone outside?" Soren's eyes hardened. "Some will die." "Some?" Mara said. "Millions. Sacrifice is unavoidable." Mara laughed bitterly. "That's what everyone always says when someone else is supposed to die." Soren charged. Kale met him halfway. Their weapons collided with enough force to shake the chamber. Soren fought like a man who had spent his entire life preparing for one battle. Kale fought like a man who had spent his life surviving battles he never wanted. Mara moved around them, searching for the seal. The crystal sword pulsed in her hand. She noticed an inscription beneath the pedestal. "What does this say?" Her mother looked. "It says the seal can only be opened by someone who willingly gives up their greatest memory." Mara's stomach tightened. What memory? Her mother looked at Kale. The memory of love. Mara stared at her. No. That is the price. Kale heard them. Then don't do it. Mara turned toward him. If I don't, people die. Then we find another way. What if there isn't one? There is always another way. Soren struck Kale across the chest. Kale fell against the wall. Mara ran toward him. Soren raised his spear. Mara lifted the crystal sword. The two weapons collided. A burst of light blinded everyone. When Mara could see again, she was standing in a field of summer flowers. No fortress. No snow. No war. Kale stood beside her, wearing the clothes of a 17-year-old boy. Mara looked down. She was 6. This is the memory, she whispered. Kale nodded. Yes. They watched their younger selves playing beside a river. The little Mara held out a wooden horse. The boy Kale accepted it. If you're scared, young Mara said, hold this. Young Kale smiled. Will you come back? I promise. Mara felt tears on her face. This is the memory I have to give up. Kale took her hand. Don't. If I do, I can seal the creature. You'll forget me. Maybe. You'll forget your mother. Maybe. You'll forget everything that brought us here. Mara looked at him. Then I'll make new memories. Kale shook his head. You can't know there'll be enough. She smiled sadly. Neither did you when you first promised to protect me. The memory began dissolving around them. Mara hugged him. If I forget you, remind me. Kale held her tightly. Every day. The field vanished. Mara opened her eyes in the fortress. The crystal sword had changed. The blade was now covered in golden cracks. Soren stood frozen. Ren stared. Mara's mother was crying. Kale was on his knees in front of her. Mara. She looked at him. For a terrifying moment, she did not recognize him. His face was familiar, but the memory behind it was gone. Who are you? Kale closed his eyes. The pain in his expression nearly broke her heart. I'm Kale. She nodded slowly. The Beast King. Yes. You look sad. He laughed through tears. I suppose I am. Mara looked at the wooden horse hanging from his belt. She did not know why he carried it. Yet when she saw it, her heart ached. She reached for it. Where did you get that? Kale stared at the toy. You gave it to me. I did. A long time ago. Mara held it. Something warm stirred inside her. Not a memory. A choice. She smiled. Then I suppose I should give you another. She kissed him. The fortress trembled. Beneath the sea, the creature screamed. The sound shattered every window in Blackwater Hold. Soren fell to his knees. What have you done? Mara turned toward the frozen sea. I think I've changed the rules. The crystal sword rose from her hand and flew through the ceiling. It struck the clouds. Golden light spread across the sky. Every guardian trapped between worlds appeared above the fortress, thousands of ghostly figures descending like snow. The creature beneath the sea began feeding on them, but instead of consuming their memories, the golden light separated each memory from the creature's hunger. The guardians became human. Bodies formed where spirits had been. Across the northern horizon, thousands of people emerged from the snow, confused, frightened, alive. Soren stared in disbelief. You freed them. Mara nodded. Without sacrificing them. Her mother smiled. You found the third way. Then the sea exploded. A black shape rose from beneath the ice, enormous enough to cast a shadow across the valley. It had no eyes, no mouth, and no recognizable form. Yet Mara could hear it speaking inside her mind. It showed her every fear she had ever buried. The kitchen. The palace. Her mother's absence. The night she believed nobody would care if she died. The creature whispered, You were nothing before I found you. Mara gripped Kale's hand. She looked at the monster and answered aloud, That's the lie. The creature recoiled. I was never nothing. Golden light spread from the broken crown mark on her palm. I was a girl. The light grew brighter. Then I became a servant. Kale stood beside her. Then a bride. Ren raised his sword. Then a queen. Mara shook her head. No. She looked toward the freed guardians. Something better. The creature surged forward. Mara lifted the crystal blade. A person who chooses. She drove the sword into the frozen ground. The entire northern sea turned gold. The creature screamed as thousands of stolen memories burst from its body and returned to their owners. Across the world, people suddenly remembered things they had lost: names, faces, promises, songs, childhood homes. Mara felt the flood pass through her. She remembered her mother. She remembered the little boy beside the river. She remembered Kale's hand in hers. She remembered every moment she had chosen him. And she understood that the memory she had sacrificed had not truly vanished. It had become part of the world around her. The creature collapsed into the sea. The ice closed over it. Silence followed. Soren dropped his spear. It is over. Mara looked at Kale. No. He frowned. What? She smiled. Now it is over. He laughed. Then he pulled her into his arms. Around them, the freed guardians began cheering. Ren shouted something about finding a healer. Mara's mother stood beneath the ruined fortress, watching her daughter with a pride she had never been able to express while hiding in the mountain. The Beast King was no longer feared as a monster. The substitute bride was no longer a substitute. And the ancient power that had demanded sacrifice for centuries had finally been defeated by the one thing it had never understood, a human being who refused to surrender her right to choose: For the first time in generations, the northern sea was quiet. No black waves rose beneath the ice. No ancient voices whispered from the cliffs. No guardian bells sounded from forgotten towers. Yet Mara knew better than to mistake silence for an ending. She stood on the battlements of Blackwater Hold 3 days after the battle, watching the rescued guardians gather in the valley below. Thousands had survived. Some had been trapped for centuries. Others had been born from memories so old that they could not remember their original names. They wandered among the tents while healers treated their wounds, while soldiers brought food, blankets, and water. Some cried when they saw ordinary things like bread or fire. Others stood motionless, unable to understand that they were free. Mara watched a man touch a wooden fence for nearly an hour, smiling as though he had discovered treasure. Kale joined her carrying 2 cups of tea. Your mother says you haven't slept. Mara accepted the cup. Your mother says you haven't slept either. She's not my mother. She has adopted you. That sounds dangerous. Mara smiled. The wind lifted her hair. Do you remember the memory I gave up? Kale became quiet. No. Neither do I. She looked at him. But I remember that I loved you. He smiled. That's enough. She leaned against the stone wall. Is it? For me. Mara studied him. You still remember everything? Everything. That seems unfair. Why? Because you remember our first meeting. Kale laughed. You mean when you were pretending to be a princess and threatening to throw yourself off a mountain? I wasn't threatening. You were. I was making a strategic observation. You were standing on a cliff. A strategic cliff. Kale shook his head. I remember the first time I saw you as a child too. Mara looked toward him. Tell me. You were 6. You had mud on your face and a wooden horse in your hand. You walked into the castle kitchen, looked at me, and asked why I was hiding. What did you say? I told you I wasn't hiding. And I believed you. No. Mara laughed softly. That sounds like me. You sat beside me anyway. He looked toward the valley. I had been told all my life that I was dangerous. You were the first person who didn't care. Mara touched his hand. Maybe that's why I recognized you even after I forgot. Before Kale could answer, Ren came running up the stairs. We have a problem. Mara sighed. Of course we do. Ren stopped beside them, breathing hard. One of the rescued guardians is missing. Kale's expression changed. Who? Soren. Mara turned toward the valley. He escaped. No. Ren shook his head. He was taken. Kale's hand went to his sword. By whom? Ren looked toward the sea. We found these. He held out 3 black feathers. Mara recognized them immediately. They were not feathers from any bird she knew. Each one shimmered with a faint dark light. Her mother had warned them that the creature beneath the sea had been defeated, not necessarily destroyed. Mara's stomach tightened. Where did you find them? At the edge of the old ruins. Kale frowned. There were no birds there. I know. Mara touched one feather. The instant her fingers made contact, she heard a whisper. Not the creature's voice. A man's voice. Soren's. The hunger was never beneath the sea. Mara pulled her hand away. What did you hear? Kale asked. She looked at him. Soren. Ren's face went pale. He's alive. Yes. Where? Mara stared toward the horizon. He said the hunger was never beneath the sea. Kale's expression hardened. Then where was it? Mara's mother appeared at the top of the stairs. She had heard the question. Inside the Guardians. Everyone turned toward her. What does that mean? Mara asked. Her mother walked slowly toward them. The creature was never a single being. It was a parasite. It attached itself to memory. Every guardian who sacrificed themselves to the mountain carried a piece of it. Kale's eyes narrowed. Then when we freed them, we freed the parasite too. Silence. Ren stared at the black feathers. How many pieces? Thousands. Mara looked down into the valley. Thousands of newly freed people were walking among the tents. Then we didn't defeat it. Her mother shook her head. You changed it. Into what? Something that can no longer feed on memories. Then why are people disappearing? Her mother looked toward the western horizon. Because it has found another source. Kale's expression became grim. Fear. Her mother nodded. Fear does not need memory. Mara looked at the valley. People who had just escaped centuries of imprisonment were terrified, confused, and vulnerable. A perfect feeding ground. She immediately began walking down the stairs. Kale followed. Where are you going? To the survivors. Why? Because if fear is feeding it, then panic will make it stronger. Ren understood. We need to keep them calm. Mara shook her head. No. We need to give them something else. What? She looked at the freed guardians. A reason to believe tomorrow exists. By sunset, Mara had turned the military camp into something resembling a village. Fires were built. Food was cooked in enormous pots. Musicians from Varin began playing old songs. Healers organized sleeping areas. Children from nearby settlements were brought in to help distribute blankets. It was not a military strategy. It was deliberately ordinary. Mara walked among the survivors, listening to their stories. One woman remembered being a bride in a kingdom that no longer existed. Another remembered a son who had been an old man when she entered the mountain, though she had remained 23. A man remembered a brother whose name had vanished from history. Mara wrote every name down. Why are you doing that? Kale asked. Because if memory is what they lost, then we will give it back. He looked at the growing list. That's going to take years. Then we have years. That night, the first black feather appeared inside the camp. It landed beside a fire. Nobody noticed it at first. Then a child picked it up. The flame turned black. The child screamed. Every person nearby began running. Mara reached the fire and grabbed the feather. The darkness surged up her arm. She saw a vision. Soren was standing inside a ruined temple. Around him were hundreds of people wearing silver masks. Behind them stood a door. Not the mountain door. Not the sea prison. A different door. One that looked exactly like the entrance to the palace in Lythorn. Mara dropped the feather. Lythorn. Kale immediately understood. The palace. The original guardian chamber is beneath the palace. Ren cursed. We never searched it. Mara's mother closed her eyes. Because it was sealed by royal blood. Mara looked at her. Mine. Yes. Kale reached for his sword. Then we leave at dawn. Mara shook her head. Tonight. You're exhausted. So is the enemy. He stared at her. You really enjoy making impossible decisions. You married me knowing that. I did. He smiled. I regret nothing. They left Blackwater Hold before midnight with only 12 riders. Ren wanted 50. Mara refused. A large army will warn them. Kale agreed. They traveled south through a narrow forest where the trees grew so densely that moonlight barely touched the ground. Around 3 in the morning, they found the first sign that they were being followed. A horse stood in the middle of the road. Its saddle was empty. Mara recognized the royal crest. That's a Lythorn horse. Ren dismounted. No rider. He examined the saddle. Blood. Kale looked into the forest. We're being watched. Mara heard a branch break. She turned. Nothing. Then a whisper came from behind her. Aurelia. She spun around. A woman stood between the trees. She was dressed in the wedding gown Mara had worn when she first entered Varin. Her face was pale. Her eyes were completely black. Mara froze. Who are you? The woman smiled. The bride who came before you. Kale stepped in front of Mara. Stay back. The ghost laughed. You always do that. Kale's face changed. Seraphine. Mara looked at him. You knew her. She was the last bride before you. Seraphine tilted her head. He promised to save me too. Kale lowered his sword. I tried. You failed. Yes. And now you have another bride. Mara stepped around him. I'm not his substitute. Seraphine stared at her. No. She smiled. You're worse. Mara frowned. Why? Because you made him believe he could be human. The ghost raised one hand. The forest vanished. Mara found herself standing in the old Varin palace as it had existed 17 years earlier. Kale was young again, wearing a black royal uniform. Seraphine stood opposite him. She was crying. You told me the mountain would release me, she said. Young Kale shook his head. I was wrong. You lied. I didn't know. You should have. Seraphine turned toward the mountain door. Then I will open it myself. Mara watched as the memory continued. Seraphine had entered the underground chamber. Kale followed. The crown of ash was waiting. Seraphine touched it. The parasite entered her body. Kale fought her. He failed. Then Mara saw something that contradicted every story she had ever heard. Seraphine did not become the monster. She deliberately trapped the parasite inside herself. She sacrificed her own existence to stop it from spreading. Young Kale stood outside the chamber, believing she had died. The vision ended. Mara turned toward Seraphine. You weren't killed. No. You protected him. Yes. Why? Seraphine looked toward Kale. Because he was the first person who apologized when he couldn't save me. Mara felt tears gather in her eyes. Seraphine continued, but the parasite has learned. It can now imitate those we remember. Mara's blood ran cold. Then you're not Seraphine. The ghost smiled. No. Kale raised his sword. What are you? The figure's face distorted. Its wedding veil burned away. Beneath it was a faceless shadow. The thing you carried out of the mountain. It lunged. Kale struck it. The blade passed through. Mara lifted her hand. Golden light burst from her palm, forcing the creature backward. It screamed. You cannot destroy fear. Mara answered, I don't need to. She stepped forward. I only need to stop believing its lies. The creature shrank. It transformed into a child. Then into Mara's mother. Then into Kale. Each time Mara refused to react. Finally, it took the form of Mara herself. You are nothing without me. Mara looked at her double. That's exactly what you want me to believe. She raised the crystal sword. But I've heard that lie before. The sword struck. The false Mara shattered into thousands of black fragments. The forest returned. Kale was standing beside her, breathing hard. Ren stared at the place where the creature had vanished. Is it dead? Mara shook her head. No. Then what did we accomplish? She looked south. We hurt it. Kale followed her gaze. And now it knows we're coming. At sunrise, they reached the outskirts of Lythorn. The capital looked peaceful from a distance. Too peaceful. No guards stood on the walls. No banners moved in the morning wind. The gates were open. Mara's mother stopped her horse. "This is wrong." Kale nodded. "Very." They entered slowly. The streets were empty. Shops stood open. Food sat untouched on tables. A carriage had crashed into a fountain. There were no bodies. No blood. Just silence. Mara dismounted. "Where is everyone?" A child's voice answered from an alley. "Inside." Mara turned. A little boy stood there. "Inside where?" He pointed toward the royal palace. "They are waiting." Kale drew his sword. Mara looked at the palace. Every window was dark. Yet behind the highest tower, something enormous moved. Mara's broken crown mark began burning. Her mother whispered, "The palace has awakened." Mara took Kale's hand. "Then let's wake it up properly." They walked toward the gates. As they entered the palace courtyard, the doors slammed shut behind them. Thousands of candles ignited simultaneously. On the throne sat Soren. Beside him stood Queen Celeste. Alive. Smiling. Mara stopped dead. Celeste lifted a goblet. "Welcome home, Aurelia." Kale raised his sword. "You're dead." Celeste smiled. "I was." Mara stared at her. "Then what are you?" Celeste's eyes became black. "The woman who finally learned how to survive." Soren stood. "The first guardian has returned." Behind him, the palace floor cracked open. A massive black staircase descended into darkness. Celeste extended her hand toward Mara. "Come, child." Mara tightened her grip on Kale's hand. "No." Celeste smiled. "You still think this is a choice?" The palace bells began ringing. 1, 2, 3. Then all 12 at once. Mara looked at Kale. He was already moving. "Run." They sprinted as the floor collapsed behind them. The final battle had not begun beneath the mountain or beneath the sea. It had been waiting all along beneath the palace where Mara had once believed she was nothing more than a servant. And as the darkness opened beneath her feet, she realized the cruelest secret of all. The substitute bride had never been brought to Varin to awaken the Beast King. She had been brought there to escape the place where she had been born,